STC. Okay, let's go ahead and the static fire. The problem we've got now is somehow or other the communications that we're making out of spacecraft are slopping over into Black 2, and they're coming in there just as strong as they are in Black 3. Of course, that clobbers the test supervisor's net. Okay, we'll stand by here a minute. Let's go ahead and make the simulated static fire and get that out of the way while we still got something we can talk with. Alright, Chuck, something else has just come up. I'm trying to get an answer on it now. CC, you copy me on Black 3? Can you get Black 2? We've got a tie here between Black 2 and 3. That's, are you hearing all this talk on Black 2 from the spacecraft?
Research, George.
Okay, we've got a hard tie. You won't be able to get in touch with me until I get it cleared as long as the spacecraft is talking. PAST, this is MSTC. Go ahead, Caster. Okay, have we got all 3 astronauts patched S-band into Black 3? That's big M. That's affirmative. We've got, the only thing we've got anybody on is Black 3. Okay, you have got S-band patched into Black 3. That's affirmative. S-band is patched to Black 3. If not, I can't read you. That is affirmative. S-band is on Black 3. STC, GNS, we're 30 at the clock. Roger. Okay, SCS, you cleared up over there? Okay, GNS, your recorder's all clear now? Roger. Okay, RCS, you ready to go to the static fire this time? Roger. Okay. Okay, Gus, you guys ready to pick up now? We said yes. Okay, I didn't copy the third time. I see you pilot on panel 15. The service module RCS-A, helium number 1, on then center.
On and center.
I didn't copy you yet.
It is on and center.
RCS, we gotta go? Okay, roger. Okay. RCS-B, on then center.
On and center.
Yeah, stable. Roger. RCS-C, on then center.
On it. Yes, center.
Roger. RCS-D, on then center.
On and center.
You bought it, RCS-D, on then center.
It's on and center.
Okay. I see you bought it, the service module RCS-A, helium number 2, on then center.
On and center.
Okay, B, C, and D, on then center.
B on and center. C center. C and D center.
Yeah. The service module RCS prop A, B, C, and D, on then center.
Roger. A center. B center. C center. D center.
Can you verify gray bars on all 12? You pilot, you verify gray bars?
That's affirmative. 12 gray bars. That's affirmative. 12 gray bars.
CFDC, verify 87? Verified. Verified, Skip. Yeah. RCS, you verify your camera coverage is satisfactory for the static fire. No, verified. Yeah. Alright, command pilot on panel 25. The A and C roll. Main A and B open.
Miami Center, Harpo 5500.
They're open. A and B roll, main A and B open. and B open.
Main B.
All main A and B open.
B open.
Roger, you verify your pitch main A is closed.
Pitch main A is closed.
Roger, on panel 8, your SCS channel pitch to on.
Pitch is on.
A and C and B and D roll to off.
A and C roll, B and D roll is on.
Yaw to off.
Yaw is on.
RCS command to on.
RCS command is on.
Okay, now I'll ask you for a specific position, Gus, and give me that position for not more than a second. Do you copy?
Roger.
Okay, Gus, I can't read you.
I copy.
Okay. Unpin your rotational controller.
It's unpinned.
Okay, give us a minus pitch.
Roger, minus pitch.
RCS is go. Roger. Your camera go for the... Oh, Roger. Plus pitch. Okay. All right, give us a plus pitch. RCS is go. Cameras go. Roger. All right, command pilot on panel 25. Your SCS pitch, main A to open.
It's open.
Yaw main B to close.
Yaw main B closed.
And on panel 8, your SCS channel pitch to off.
Pitch is off.
Yaw on.
Yaw on.
Give us a minus yaw. RCS is go, cameras go. Roger. Give us a plus yaw.
You get plus yaw?
Roger, give us a plus yaw.
I did. I'll give you one more.
RCS is go, cameras go. Roger. All right, command pilot on panel 8. Your SCS channel B and D roll to on.
B and D roll is on.
Pitch and yaw on.
Pitch and yaw is on.
Direct RCS to off.
Direct RCS is off.
Panel 16, RCS command to off.
RCS command is off.
Panel 25, your direct control main A and B closed.
It's closed. They're closed.
Roger, your A and C roll main A and B closed.
A and C roll main A, main B.
Roger, your B and D roll main A and B closed.
B and D roll main A, main B.
All right, your pitch main A closed.
Pitch main A.
Pitch main B closed.
Pitch main B.
Okay, your yaw main A closed.
Yaw main A.
Roger, you verify your yaw main B is closed.
That's what it is.
Okay, Gus, give us rotation in all 6 directions so that we can verify that no jets fire, please. Let us know when you're finished.
Okay, minus pitch. Plus pitch. Minus roll, yaw. Plus yaw. Minus roll, plus roll.
No jets fired. Roger. Okay, on the following, we're going to get the cloud pressures and temperature. It won't mean much, just give us what you read there. Okay, senior pilot on panel 12, give us your cloud indications on A, B, C, and D, helium pressure, manifold pressure, and helium temperature.
Roger, the A, it's reading about 20. That's helium pressure. Manifold is 30. Helium temperature is reading 200. You ready for B? Are you ready for B?
Roger, go right down them whenever you finish, senior pilot.
Roger, B is 30. 200. C is 25, 30, 200. D is 25, 30, 200.
Okay, command pilot, pin your rotational controller. Rotational controller is dead. Order. Okay, CLTC, we are at the minus 15th one. Roger, understand. Ready to pick up the count, is that a firm? That is a firm. Okay, CLTC, MSTC. CLTC, MSTC. Well. CLTC, MSTC. MSTC, CSTC. Well, okay, we're going to pick up, but we'll stay in this configuration that we're in now for the rest of the run, right? On Black Sea. Roger that. Okay, Chuck, we'd like everybody to be aware that once we lift off, we've got about 5 hours maximum on our fuel cell substitute batteries. Roger. Okay, pad leader CSTC. That's 5 meter. Okay, you verify that you got your umbilical handlers ready to go over? Roger. Seconds, we'll pick up. Lift off. Okay, CSTC, MSTC. Go ahead. Go ahead, MSTC. Okay, we got word from the communications people that we will very possibly lose a commander on liftoff in the present configuration. I'll have him come up on the net and explain what he means. Okay. This is MCOM. Both PMIL and LLC have reported no modulation on the uplink RF. This indicates that with the commander we are going through a hardline configuration. Okay, with flat pilot only. Critical. Roger. Okay. We better, got some suggestions. Stop here and regroup again. Okay, we need to check cast configuration. Radio contact. Clearance has been made. Cast is S-band Black 3, VHF Black 3, intercom umbilical is Black 3. Alright, take everything off but S-band. Okay, everything's going off but S-band.
This is Ryan. I'm reading you loud and clear. Okay, I'm in TR. You're off a week. Say again. That's negative. We had dead silence up here. I'm reading you now.
We've been talking to the... Okay, you're back up now on the VHF and the umbilical. You should have good time. Roger. Ground pilot, STC, do you read?
I'm clear.
Okay, okay, stand by. Cast, STC, do you read? Roger, reading you loud and clear. Okay, once again, I'd like to verify. The only thing that we are patched to Black 3 is S-band. Negative, not now. We're patched back on VHF and umbilical both. Okay, alright, senior pilot, okay, can you take us off hardline? Can you verify we are off hardline? We weren't, but, okay, you're off hardline now. You're talking to them on VHF.
Can you read me now?
Who's transmitting? Why didn't clock off?
It's command pilot. Can you read me?
This is Fast. I'm reading him. How about this, TC? Okay, command pilot, how do you read?
I read you loud and clear. Do you read me?
You're pretty garbled here, Gus.
Yeah, well, my VHF TR is turned off. I shouldn't be transmitting at all.
Okay, you're pretty garbled. Senior pilot, can you hear us?
Roger, I read you 5 square.
Okay, you're worse than Gus. How about you, Rod?
Well, I turned my switch on, though. Okay, I'm reading you 5 by 5.
Okay, Rod, you were just a little bit better. STC, ECS. Go ahead, ECS. We have to clean our surge tank quite a bit. Check for the crew to see if they have a face plate open, do small oversight. Roger, proceed. SCMB, pilot. You're going to have to speak up, ECS. Roger. CMB, this is ECS. Do you read me?
Yes, I did have my face plate open for a minute.
Roger, could you close that? We're depleting the surge tank plate.
Yeah, it's closed off.
CASD, CSDC. MSDC, CSDC. CSDC, ECS. You can continue. Oh, yeah. Okay, Gus, what we'd like to do is try strictly S-band communications and see if we can't clear this up. Can we get a verification that all 3 of you are in the S-band mode?
Yes, we are all on the S-band.
Okay, CAST, do you read? 5 copies.
Roger, I read you 5 square.
16. Miami Center, Victor Mike 14, flight level 290. Will this be my altitude for the flight? I had file for 320, that's not available 29 to be okay. I had file for 320, but if that's not available, 29 will be okay.
Command pilot 12345544321. Roger, senior pilot counting 12345544321. Senior pilot. Roger, senior pilot's transmitting 12345544321. Senior pilot. Senior pilot counting 12345544321.
Pilot, hadn't talked to you yet. How's this? 123454321.
of it. Cruiser.
Hey, how are we gonna get the moon if we can't talk between three buildings? I can't hear a thing you're saying. Jesus Christ. Again? But how are we gonna get the moon if we can't talk between two or three buildings?
Hey, crew, can you egress at this time? Confirm it. Bad leader, get in there and help them. Bad leader, CFCC. All right, crew, did we get verification? Can you egress at this time? Tom, were you able to hear us? Stop. MRS. Best, can you read us? Bad leader? Can you get him out of there?
Some places you could see right down to the clear, I presume, copper. The wires were ragged. Ragged meaning the insulation was ragged where the fire had, eaten away more in one place, less in another. The bottom of the spacecraft, below the frame, was littered with strips and, again, clumps of debris which were unrecognizable. I noticed a small green piece of harness, which I believe was from a parachute, not parachute, the restraining harness rather, was approximately midway between White's position and Chafee's position. The flight plan was resting up against the sidearm controller between Grissom and White's flight plan. It was badly charred, but still recognizable as a book. The pages looked very, very brittle, brown. Surprisingly, there was one page that was almost at the top of Ed White's, see, about where his head would have been, where the printing was still legible, and only the edges of the page were scorched. It's almost a uniformly slate gray interior with one corner appeared to me to be brownish white, to be discolored in a brownish white deposit, but I couldn't tell if that was the lighting or if it was actually the color. It was way over in the far right-hand corner. The head supports for Grissom and Chafee were in the up position, but with the side arms folded down. It's a curve with these two arms that would come up and hold them around the side of the head. These were folded down like the arms of a restraining chair. White's head support was folded down and beneath the frame to permit access into the spacecraft. There were hand marks on the soot-covered handrail above the hatch. This is part of the facility. This is what they grab as they go into the spacecraft. It should be sort of a shiny white. It was covered with soot, and there were hand marks on it. There was a splattering of oil around the frame of the white room that actually touches the command module. I couldn't find out where this came from though. There were two hatches. One, the boost protect cover hatch. These were resting outside the white room in the service room, which is part of the structure, the service tower. It was white with a black sooty border. I counted 4 finger streaks through the suit on the upper left-hand corner, and there were smudgy finger marks also on the left side. Obviously someone from the outside, one of the launch crew, trying to get it off. The window was totally dark, as a window would be from a fire. I couldn't tell if it was the darkness behind the window that prevented me from seeing through it, or whether it was just blackened. I suspect it was blackened. The internal hatch, which is part of the permanent part of the spacecraft, is a brownish color normally, and with an aluminum border, and it was blackened all along the bottom edge of it from soot. There was a very noticeable odor, by the way, when you walked right into the service room. You entered the service room first and then the white room second. The minute you opened the door, there was a bitter, the bitter smell of smoke. There's no other way to describe it. It became more pronounced when you went into the white room, and as we crouched at the entrance of the hatch to the command module, it became even more pronounced. It smelled like an electrical fire too, by the way. You could smell burned insulation. That patch of green harness, by the way, was about 3 or 4 inches long and about 1 inch wide, and it was between White and Chafee's seat. Okay, the outside of the spacecraft. As you walked into the service room, there were 2 pieces of polyurethane foam laying right there off the edge of the step. They appeared to be about 3 feet long and about 1 foot wide. They were charred all along the edge. I tried to find out where these came from. No one would tell me. By the way, we were not permitted to ask any questions of anybody up in the top of the tower. That was taboo. There was also a discarded and crumpled expansion hose of the type that would bring in gas. One of these large hoses, about 8 or 10 inches in diameter. It was just laying there with this foam rubber. The white boost protective cover cap was still on the spacecraft. That extends down, over the apex of the command module. Most of the boost protect cover, about 270 degrees, around the main body of the spacecraft were removed, showing the normal gray surface of the command module. There was a sheet of black plastic, or the remains of a sheet of black plastic, that had been placed over the command module to protect the boost protect cover, and it obviously had either been ripped away or burned away. There was only a strip left hanging like a black mourner's ribbon through the legs of the escape tower. We could see 3 control panels at the base of the command module where the hatches were open and there was ground support or ground test equipment hooked up to it. The first one that we encountered was marked, had a little plate over it, and was marked Fuel Control Panel. All the wire bundles in here appeared to be moderately burned, and there was a trace of smoke, a smoke pattern trace, a triangular trace coming up from this open panel up along the side, the gray side of the command module. The next panel that we encountered, which was 3-4 feet away, was marked Oxidizer Control Panel. There was greater evidence of charring and burning here, with wires melted together, fused together. It was extremely difficult to recognize individual components or even wire bundles. Then we got around to another panel where the plate had either fallen off or been taken off. I'm told nothing was changed out there since the incident, so it must be presumed that the plate indicating what panel that was must have fallen off. By far, this was the most damage. The fire here in this panel had been so intense that there really wasn't anything left in it, except mounting brackets for the electronic components. This was immediately adjacent to the spacecraft umbilical, which was still plugged in. This was where the greatest amount of damage, by the way, was noticeable on the outside of the spacecraft. If you reference it to the access hatch, it would have been to the immediate right of the hatch, in other words, approximately over Chafee's shoulder. And I was speaking about the exterior. There were small blisters on the heat shield here. There were some small pieces of this gray material which were gone, like paint would flake off and showing the next level down of the heat shield. The American flag was obscured, not totally obscured, but partially obscured by gray soot. Looked very dingy, and the letters United States were also covered with soot. I would say that this pie-shaped segment of soot and charring on the outside of the spacecraft was a wedge approximately 30 to 40 degrees and extending up to the white boost protect cover. All around the outside of the spacecraft there were bits and pieces of carbonized material. It was hard to say what it looked like, paper, but it may have been that plastic sheet. I don't know. There was a table about 3 or 4 feet from this one bad area of damage, and the desktop was just littered with brittle carbonized material. I counted at least 4 fire extinguishers on the outside of the spacecraft, at least 12. Some obviously had been used because they were just thrown in a corner. Well, they were upright and mounted. Some were upright and mounted where you would expect them to be in a facility like that. Others obviously had been used. You could tell from the way the nozzles had been pulled out of their restraining hoops and then later just thrown over in a corner. I don't know if all were used or not, but some obviously had. Now there's a gap between the command module and service module, which is later covered by a fairing when they get ready for flight. Oh, by the way, there were several gas masks on the floor, just dropped. There were also approximately a half dozen of these very thin, transparent rubber gloves of the type that surgeons would wear. The very, very tight, thin rubber gloves. These were thrown on the floor also, kicked over to one side. Again, I couldn't find out who had used them. They obviously had been used in handling something that was dirty and covered with ash. There was also an asbestos jacket thrown over a guardrail leading out of the service room. Well, I was going to tell you about what was visible at the top of the service module. There is a sheet of aluminized mylar. It's a very bright silver cover, and in places where the fire hadn't touched it, it was still very bright and shiny. But over by the umbilical connection, it was discolored. It had burned through in some places, and it looked, the top surface of it looked like the crumpled foil of a cigarette pack that had laid out in the sun too long. Okay, we then went down to the 7th level, which is the floor immediately below the command module, and here we could see the service module. There was an access hatch removed from the side of the shiny aluminum and white service module. It was marked Cryo Storage Access Hatch. Cryo Storage Access Hatch. I estimated it CRYO for cryogenic. It appeared to be about 1.5 feet by 1.5 feet. You could see some cabling through this opening, which had obviously been burned, and the insulation was hanging in shreds. It was blackened and had rather ragged edges. Going around to where the umbilical connection was to the command module and looking up, you could see smudge marks visible on the white underbelly of the command module. Here, as on the next floor above, there were pieces of soot, carbon, and ash around the floor. There were also fire extinguishers here, but they did not appear to have been used. There was some odd grease drippings, grease or oil. I believe it was oil. I counted roughly a dozen to 16 long strings of oil which had run down the side of the command module. It appeared to be the same oil that I had seen evidence of around the hatch of the command module, and they just had run down in long strings for the entire length that I could see in that floor, and then had dried. That was, by the way, the only really noticeable sign of anything to the exterior of the service module. I think that's about it. I'm going to go down and write this up. Anybody have any questions? Maybe. I looked for any indication of structural collapse, of metal parts. I couldn't distinguish any. Now, there may have been, and I was not aware of it, but there was nothing really noticeable like a beam that had sagged or anything. No, nothing like that. In what way, Dave?
You can see the switch dial in the handle on the switch.
Yes, but the dials are all covered over with this soot. Yes, it's the entire interior is almost uniformly covered with this slate gray. I couldn't touch anything. I don't know if it's because the original paint or whatever material they had coated the inside with had burned away, bringing it down to bare metal, or whether it was soot. From the unevenness of the deposit, though, I suspected that it was a smoke deposit as opposed to bare material.
How many people were up there?
There were guards, by the way, at just about every step from a roadblock a mile and a half away from the complex. All the way at every level that you reached, you had to go through a guard. There was a guard, and there were two technicians that I saw up on the level of the command module who appeared to be there working. And then we had, there were three of us, three press, and Jack King, Charlie Buckley, and a Pan American pad safety man. By the way, that carried eight cables that I counted of varying sizes, varying thicknesses. The cabling all appeared to be good, but it went into a panel, a plate rather, and it was impossible to see around the plate, but where you could begin to see something, there was evidence of the melted wires, very ragged insulation that had obviously burned. There was obviously a great amount of heat. The greatest amount of heat was concentrated in the area of the umbilical connection to the spacecraft. And this panel that I mentioned, the panel which has no identification, is approximately 1.5 to 2 feet away from where the umbilical comes into the spacecraft. No one would answer any questions for us. The only thing that I've ever seen like it is the cockpit of a jet fighter that went in and burned. No sign of overpressurization as you'd get in an explosion. It was just a gutted shell. It looked like a bunker from World War II or the Korean War that had taken a direct hit.
Two questions. First of all, what, according to your question, what substance which actually burned inside the cabin activated by the oxygen? And second question, had the fire pierced through the metal sheeting of the capsule to char the outside, or where in your opinion did the flame which charred the outside come from?
Answer to your first question, what burned? I'd have to say just about everything that was in there, except for these few odd bits and pieces, like a page which had only its edges, a page about this size, which had only its edges slightly browned, and this bit of parachute harness, but everything else burned in there. I think the couches were removed. In fact, they had to be removed. This frame that was visible, obviously the crew wouldn't rest on that during flight, so the couches had to be removed. But again, I couldn't ask that. My impression is that when they took the bodies out, they took the bodies out on the couch. But Gordon, can you confirm that? But where did the fire come from that marked the outside? It obviously came from these access panels. These panels are mounted right at the bottom of the command module where it curves to go under the underbelly. The fire obviously came out of these panels and shot up the length of the command module. That's my impression, yes. Backed up through these lines and squared. By the way, these panels were not covered over. I think I'm safe in saying that's standard at this time of the testing and preparation for launch, to allow the connection of ground support and ground test equipment to these different systems. This is where you do make the connections to it. And when the tests are all finished, then all these plugs are pulled and test points and so on, and the panels put back in. So don't get the impression that the fire threw panels off because the panels weren't on there to begin with.
They were not on.
No, not these access panels. The crew hatch was on, yes, and that had been removed. Yes.
Recognize the location. You could tell where it was.
No. No, you couldn't.
Where it was recognized.
I doubt it was extremely dark in there. Even with...
They went in.
Oh, yes. Switch positions did not appear to have been changed by the fire. In other words, where the toggle switches melted, not... My impression is that they were not. They were distinguishable. At least they threw distinct shadows where I could see them. I don't know, Sue. I don't know. Label what? Oh, no, it did. It's the only umbilical, though, to the spacecraft, to the command module. To the right of the crew access hatch, it would have been at approximately off Chafee's side. There is a cutout in the floor which allows this umbilical arm to come back when it's retracted. It's a slot. That slot was empty, meaning the arm was forward, and from what I could see, all these plugs went into a plate, and that plate was connected physically to something on the spacecraft. My visual observation was that it was connected, yes. I found it in one of the press books. They're inside the spacecraft. It's in one of the press lower ECS compartment or something, but I see the batteries? No. In this cryogenic storage hatch, there was something missing. There was a circular horizontal plate. There's a horizontal plate with a circular cutout. Something had been in there, and it no longer was. I presume it's the oxygen bottle because of the burning of the wires, but I don't know that for a fact. I couldn't tell. There was just too much ash and debris on the, you mean on the floor? Just too much ash and debris covering it. Okay, I'll try and get all this written up and so you got some